Our research is really focused primarily on heart-brain communication. We're what's called a psychophysiology laboratory. So we really study the physiology of emotion, how emotion affects the body in many different ways, hormones, immune system, nervous system activity, and how the heart and brain communicate with each other. And that's led to a lot of discoveries over the last 30 years in that space. But we also then look at the how our physiological rhythms, like heart rhythms and brain waves, things like that, will synchronize with others, especially when there's a positive emotional connection between people. That's when you see that emerge, and that's proving to be really important. But we also study how humanity is really interacts with, is affected by the planetary magnetic fields of Earth and how we affect those fields and transfer information back and forth. But our main focus actually has been, once we really deeply understood the physiology of emotion and how the heart and brain communicate, developing very simple, user-friendly techniques and technologies as well that facilitate people learning the skill to shift their physiology into what we call a coherent, heart coherent state. And that really facilitates everything, mental function, memory, our ability to have more vitality, recover from health challenges, a very long list of things that helps facilitate.
That's amazing. We've been practicing a bit of this with our nan
Oh,
for the
great.
last few years. We got to know about these practices, like I mean the research from HeartMath and the practices too through Greg Braden mainly.
Okay, good. Greg's a good
Um,
friend. Yeah.
oh, okay, that's great. So we started practicing, and we've had the best experiences ever,
Awesome.
mainly through meditation. The meditations were unique, like
Yeah.
in like really short like brief periods of time of meditating. I got like results from like meditating hours
So
maybe.
like the heart focused meditations, like
Yeah,
heart lock in, these
exactly.
techniques. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe like to get a little bit deeper into that, what's exactly heart brain coherence, and what is it, how does it happen, how does it
Okay.
work?
Well, okay. Let me try and give you as simple of an answer as I can to that, because it's a rather to really explain that is a little bit more complex. Um, I think we would start with understanding physiologically the heart and brain are more interconnected through the nervous system than any other systems in our body. And the heart actually sends more information, neural information to the brain than the other way around by far. Okay, so it's always a two-way dialogue going on between the heart and brain. And the brain obeys the signals from the heart. And so these signals coming up from the heart go to every major brain center that we have and have actually profound influences. So when we look at the electrocardiogram or let me keep it even simpler. Most people know what heart rate is, right? How many times does the beat heart in a minute? But in reality, when you look closely, the time between each pair of heartbeats is always changing. And that's called heart rate variability. And that's what underlies or creates the heart rhythm. Right? Most people have heard that we have a heart rhythm, right? Well, the rhythm in the heart is always changing, up and down. And when you look at this, and it's very easy to do now with the apps and things we've developed to see your actual real-time heart rate variability or heart rhythm. Now, some of our very early work back in the early 1990s, tells you how old I am, found that the rhythm of the heart is the most reflective of our emotional state, far more than brain waves or any other measure. So to keep this kind of simple, when we're feeling things like impatience or frustration or especially anger or these kinds of emotions, that creates a very jagged, in what we now call incoherent heart rhythm, because it's all jagged and there's no order in it. On the other hand, when people are just naturally feeling positive feelings, appreciation, compassion, kindness, these types of feelings, that's reflected in a very different heart rhythm pattern. It becomes very larger rhythms, but it looks like if you look at it over time, like smooth rolling hills. And now that actually reflects the synchronized activity in our brain and nervous system. Okay, so I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can. And now that's important because for the brain to work well, to process information from our senses, what we hear, see, smell, our thinking, our ability to maintain our composure, in the middle of chaos, for example, that has to do with the brain's capacity to synchronize its own electrical activity. So when we're out of sync, that's when we can't think clearly. People say, I'm in a fog, right? Or our reaction times are slowed. Or we get, it's an example, a very common example, I'm sure most people have experienced at some point, is we get angry at someone. They say something or do something that just, we don't like, right? When we get frustrated or angry, it's right in those moments that we tend to say something or do something that we normally wouldn't, right? And if you think, I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and then thought, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. I don't even mean that, right? So that's an example of what's called cortical inhibition, right? Our cortex, our brain is inhibited because the activity is desynchronized. So heart-brain coherence is when the heart rhythm gets into this what we call heart coherent rhythm. And that's now sending neural messages to the brain, to a part of the brain called the thalamus, the very core of our brain that's responsible for the global synchronization of neural activity. So it enhances that global neural synchronization. So now we can think better. So, for example, our techniques are taught a lot in first responders, law enforcement, athletes, because it's a global effect on the brain. So our reaction times are quicker, but we're especially able to make better choices, right? Not have those quick reactions. Hope that
Rollin,
gives you a little bit of we could spend all
yeah.
day talking about this.
First of all, thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's amazing. Like Thomas said, we practice this a lot with Greg Braid and Joe Dispenza, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of Bruce Lipton. You have wonderful people talking about the institute. So I want to thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Um, and you were talking about like intuition, no? Like the heart gives you this sort of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I think Braden talks a lot of that. Can you
Yeah.
explain me more of that?
Yeah, I'm sure that takes us a little different direction, but that's good. So, well, let me start by saying one of the things we hear most over the years and still to this day from people who practice these coherence skills to get to shift into coherent heart coherence over time is that their intuition's like on steroids. I mean, it's radically different, right? And then the second thing we commonly would still hear, is then synchronicities have become a way of life. They just sort of magically happen, right? So that's been my own experience as well. I can say, but but this is again back in the '90s, late '90s. Hearing all of this, we developed very rigorous laboratory-based studies of intuition, and they're really to give a little more depth of an answer here. I think it's helpful to understand there are I consider three types of intuition, and we all have the ability or the capacity to have all three types, but some people have more than one than another. The first is called implicit learning or implicit knowledge, and this is where we've maybe learned something but didn't forgot we learned it or didn't even know we were learning it. Right? Watching people do things like that. We're always learning. And then that's implicit means it's a stored memory in the brain that we don't have conscious access to. Right? So we encounter a new problem and the brain is doing kind of pattern matching, trying to find a match between what's stored away unconsciously and a solution to the current problem. Okay. So that's the kind of intuition that's studied most in academia because it's really safe, because it's all about the brain, right? And it's important, and this leads to what's often called expert knowledge. There's many examples, but a very common one is a nurse who's been around for a while. An older nurse can walk into a patient's room and say, "Oh, this patient's in trouble. They're going to code in the next few minutes or hour or so." A new nurse standing next to her goes, well, how do you know that? And she goes, well, I don't know. I just know it, right? So that's an example of that type of intuition. Now, the problem with it is it can also be wrong sometimes because the pattern that because you're comparing the now to an old stored historical example, right? And there's not that there may not always be a true match between the current situation and the history. Okay, second type is called energetic sensitivity, and that's our nervous system's ability to detect and respond to usually measurable signals from the environment. Okay, we can go more into that in a minute if you want. Like empathy, or like sometimes if there's a disagreement in a meeting or a family, people say, God, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, right? We feel that, right? So that's an example. Or there are people who can feel earthquakes. I don't know if you have earthquakes in Argentina or not. We have a lot of them here where I live. But there are people who develop that sensitivity because we now know we can measure changes in the Earth's magnetic field that come right before earthquakes. So our nervous system's detecting that signal, and you've had enough experience to know, oh, that's associated with earthquake, right? So, okay, then the third type, which is really what you're asking about, Herman, is I call it non-local intuition, just because we don't have a better name. And these are the types of intuitions that you can't explain away through the other two types. And this is where the heart's very involved, especially. So this can be intuitions of something in the future, right? Or something a long ways away. Like mothers who know that their kids are in harm's way or doing something they shouldn't be doing, and they're on the other side of the planet, right? These types of things. Now, so those are types. Now, within the non-local is the type that you're really asking me about, is really the access to, I'm going to use the term our larger self. Now, every culture has their own term for it. A lot of people would call it your higher self. Some people would call it your spirit or your soul, or in other types, the God within. But it's really your inner guidance system. Now, it's actually pretty simple. It's complex, but simple. So the way I explain this now is to think we have two hearts, the physical heart, and within the physical heart, it has its own brain and nervous system and all of that. And then we also have what's called the energetic heart. Now that's been called the spiritual heart in a lot of spiritual traditions for a very long time. And what I'm suggesting is that's actually real. That's not a metaphor. So we are multi-dimensional beings, right? We have to be a living system. So we have an energetic system, right? That's kind of the glue that holds everything together and it informs shape and structure and function and so on. That's really exists at the energetic level. So the energetic heart is really the bridge between our humanness, right, and our level of consciousness actually, and our larger self. So when we practice these coherence skills and are getting coherent, that alignment that goes on physiologically is also increasing the coupling or the connection and communication between our larger self, and our heart and brain. So that's where a simple way to think of this is our inner GPS, our own inner guidance system. Now, and if I may, I'll just say one more thing. I think everyone can relate to somebody asking you to do something. I mean, a lot of people might even be able to relate to this in the last few days or week, right? Somebody asks you to do something, or your mind, thinks it wants something or to do something, but you have just this deeper feeling that that's probably not the best choice, right? But you do what the mind wants anyway, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
you
think
guys
it's
can tell
super
me if you've had that
important.
experience. And then as it plays out, you end up wishing, oh my God, I wish I'd followed that deeper inner signal, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course. I
Yeah,
think
Yeah.
exactly.
we're not actually like trained to, I don't know if trained is the actual word, but to to trust that kind of
Yeah.
gut feeling.
Well,
Because mainly, as you said before, we have those three kinds
Right.
of intuition, and we usually, at least in the scientific community, call intuition the first kind, right?
Yeah. Right.
So the
Well,
other two are mainly like, I mean, energetic sensitivity was the second.
yeah, energetic sensitivity. Yes.
Maybe we get something of that idea from like animal behavior.
Mhm.
We have it, but it's like it's a lot more obvious in the animal kingdom, like not human. I mean,
Yeah.
when like mainly in cases like earthquakes. The
Yeah.
studies from like dogs and
Sure.
earthquakes are
Yeah.
mainly
Yeah. And
this kind of
elephants and snakes and I mean, it just goes on and on in the
exactly.
animal world.
So
So
maybe we might have that kind of
yeah. So you
GPS ourselves.
yeah. So what? Let me tell you what the research showed and the way these experiments worked. I won't go into all the. It's all published in scientific journals. People can get all the details if they want to look deeper into this. But people were sitting at a computer and we're recording their brain waves, their heartbeats, electrocardiograms, skin conductance, these types of physiological measures. And so they're studying at this computer, watching a blank screen, and then we record the data. Then a picture shows up on the screen. That's either a really negative picture, like a snake striking at the screen, or a bad guy with a knife at a woman's throat. Pretty edgy stuff, about. Or the future picture might be nature scenes and flowers and bunny rabbits and things like that, right? Now, what we found was that the heart is the first to get the signal about what the future picture is going to be, sends a measurably, and this is important, different neural signal to the brain. Then you get a brain response, then the body response following that. So just like you said, Thomas, the gut feeling. So the gut gets the credit, but it's really heart first, then brain, then body, where it becomes a feeling that we can become conscious of. So like the gut, which is an effector system, it gets the input from the nervous system and we feel it there, or the hair on the back of the neck, or, those kind of feelings. So it's really heart first. And then what we also showed in that series of experiments is that when people are in a heart coherent state before we do the experiments, that channel between the heart and brain is significantly opened up right up to the frontal cortex. So people are more intuitive when they're if they practice coherence first, or that's why we always talk about before making an important decision or choice, take a minute, get coherent, tune in, see what your heart has to say about it. Listen to the voice, listen to your deeper inner voice.
It's
Yes.
an amazing
So
tool.
yeah, it's a
It's
great
really,
tool. So what you're saying is that so you got this first the heart receives the information, then the brain, and then the body.
right.
When you say brain, you're not saying consciously, like in the
Well, yeah, it's both, right? It's a process. So heart sends a signal to the brain. Then you can measure a change in brain activity, still unconscious. That brain activity leads to a response in the descending parts of the nervous system, like to the lungs, the gut, and so on. And that's when it becomes a conscious feeling. If we're paying attention to how we feel, to those subtle feelings.
of course, yeah. So this is great. So when people actually work this way, but when you make the practice, what is it exactly that is what capacity is enhanced? Like the prediction is like faster. Where do you see which?
I mean, for most people, there is no input. We don't pay attention to it. So, I mean, one of the HeartMath techniques called freeze frame is a technique that's really designed to help people connect with their heart's intuitive guidance, right? It's a 5-step technique. But with practice, you can do it right in the moment. So it's, you can really get that inner, your own higher self or larger self is really your own best friend. It's part of you. It's part of we each have one. It's part of our undivided wholeness. It's tapping into the energetic dimension of our wholeness that operates in a different dimension outside of time and space. So at that dimensional level, it knows what's best for us and what the future outcome, the probabilities of future outcomes. So it's really just a technique to slow down, to get coherent, which slows down the mental and emotional noise, if you will.
Yeah, I was actually today. I don't know why, but today I was actually remember that U.S. At the Marines phrase like smooth, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Mm-hmm.
You know that
Yeah.
sentence. It seems like when you slow down, you actually you get to a faster in means of capturing information like travels faster and more efficiently towards you.
Well, right. If the mind is racing, right, and you've got all these disturbed emotions, you're out of sync, first of all. But that it's kind of a roar of inner noise. It's really slowing down the inner rhythms to be able to hear the voice of our larger self.
Yeah, so exactly. So what we get from these kind of experiments is like space time, like it's something that some capacity that it's mainly like outside space time as we
Well,
usually.
yeah, I mean, at the energetic level, it operates outside of normal time and the boundaries of
Yeah.
normal time and space.
Okay, so now we're getting to the part where the heart seems to be like connected to the environment and to events that are not actually like direct inputs, let's say. How I heard you talk more about this, but I like how the heart is connected to how it alters the environment, how it even affects other people's states. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so we'll go another direction here. Sure. So we put electrodes on the body to measure the heartbeat, right, which is called the electrocardiogram, right? Or we stick them on your head to measure the electroencephalograph, brain waves. What the electrodes are actually measuring is the flow of electrical current. That's what they do. That's what they measure. That's why it's called the electrocardiogram, right? I mean, oops, sorry about that. So physics 101, whenever you have a moving current or a current flow, you generate a magnetic field. Now, one of the qualities of magnetic fields is they go through things. This is why cell phones work indoors. My first career was a communication engineer, so I know a little bit about this. So just like in a phone, we're using those fields to carry information, right? Your voice, the text message, whatever. So the magnetic field. That's why, again, we can have a cell phone, even in an elevator. The signal goes through the windows and the doors and walls and all that, carrying that information. Well, the older I get and the more I understand, nature beat us to all this, right? We work the same way. So the fields generated by the heart are a field that can be measured external from the body with a device called a magnetometer. The electrodes don't see the magnetic component. And you can back up the magnetometer up quite a few feet and still detect the magnetic field produced by the beating heart. You get about an inch away from the brain and you can't detect the brain signals anymore. So clearly the cardiac of the heart is the big field, the big player when we're talking energetics. Now we were able to I used to work for Motorola, so using exact same techniques I would use in those early days of my life, right? To decode or demodulate, it's called, the signal being carried by the field. We can do the same thing from the field from the heart and see that different emotions, that what we feel inside is literally translating into different vibrational patterns or information patterns being carried by the field. Right? So we can stick a probe out here in space without ever touching you, measure the field, and know with about 80% accuracy what somebody's feeling. So what this means is that what we feel inside doesn't stop at the skin. We are quite literally broadcasting and radiating these fields. You can kind of think of it as your personal field environment out into the space around us. And then the next step in that line of research was, that was pretty cool, right? And I was surprised nobody ever done that before. I mean, it was really pretty simple. The next step, though, was to ask the question, well, okay, is there a so what? Do other people's nervous systems, now this gets into energetic sensitivity we were talking about earlier. so does another person's nervous system able to detect and measurably respond to these different vibrational frequencies being carried by the field. And that was actually pretty easy to show. And this is all published in peer-reviewed scientific stuff. What this means is that there's always an energetic communication going on in when people are together, when they're whether it's a group or a couple or whatever. And then I'm not taking away from tone of voice and body language and facial. Of course, all that goes on, but there's a subtler level of communication that's also occurring that in some cases can be more important than the words that somebody's saying, or even the tone of how those words are delivered. And if you pay attention, you'll start to see this going on all the time in communications between people, right?
It's really fun and interesting because I was hearing the other day another interesting topic that is actually body language and how it also escapes our conscious perception, let's say, and how it affects us and how we interpret the other person through their body behavior, let's say. And it's like you have language, you have body language, and you have this kind of frequency language too that also escapes and also has a lot of like effect on the environment and other people. And I was hearing you talk about this water experiment. Was that before or after this that you discovered that water could actually like expand or augment this kind of like
okay. Well, you're going way back.
okay, that's before. So
yeah, well, actually, okay, it was an interesting story because how we got to the research I was just telling you about was sort of upside down in a way. Yeah, I'm almost embarrassed by it, to tell you the true story. So we were doing some experiments. This is way back in the early 90s now, with water, and we accidentally kind of discovered, I won't go into all the details, that when you put an electrode in water, that water amplifies weak electromagnetic signals, a huge amplification effect. And a very famous physicist, William Tiller, who was head of material science at Stanford, was hanging out here in our lab a lot, world expert on water and crystallization. And he said, no, that's impossible. And I said, oh, come on, Bill. Back, showed him the experiment. And okay, I'm wrong. There it is, right? And he spent months working out mathematical models to describe how this amplification effect was happening. Well, anyway, that then led to the idea, well, wait a minute, we're mostly water, depending upon how you look at it. I mean, we're, mostly beings of, water sacs, right? So if water's amplifying these magnetic signals, I wonder if we can measure a person's heartbeat in a glass of water. So that was the next experiment we did. We set up the experiment, put our electrode in the glass of water, and had a person not touching, a glass of water in front of you, electroded the person and the electrode coming out of the water. And sure enough, we could measure. So whenever you've got, well, really any liquid that's got water in it, in your field environment, you are impacting that water in a measurable way. So
that's insane. What strikes me the most is the fact that we're do we know if or do you know if like some of that information from the like frequency of a person, let's say a heart frequency from a person in the water, does that information like stays in the water? Does water capture that information?
Yeah, we're kind of getting into a different topic, but
Yeah,
I would say,
It's just a curiosity.
but I would say yes. There's a lot of factors there, but in general, yes. And that's kind of well, there's some really neat new science emerging that says you can actually transmit digitally this kind of information from water to even organize DNA. So lots of cool things. So yes, but anyway, that was those experiments that happened first before we even thought, well, wait a minute, let's look at people and what we're radiating. So you would have thought it would have been the other way around, but That's
Yeah,
what's
of course.
yeah, yeah.
So mainly like taking.
What gets you off coherence? What's
Uh,
the not to do list of things we shouldn't do to get off heart and brain coherence?
what, you're asking me what should we not do and what should we do to get the heart and brain coherent?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, I would say the key to that is first becoming more aware, self-aware of what we're feeling. And frankly, and I'm in the same category. This can be more challenging for men than women, right? But to actually pay attention and be willing to be a little more vulnerable and look under the radar of what we're really feeling. And then that's step one, because you can't plug holes in a leaking bucket until you know where the holes are, right? Because those are energy leaks, and we're putting out incoherent vibrations into our field environment, to all of our cells and out into the field. So over long term, months and years in life, that's what leads to more rapid aging. If we're feeling more frustration, impatience, these types of things, we call that stress. But stress is always one of those emotions that we're feeling of overwhelm or disconnect, separate. Really, it's separation's ultimately the answer from our own larger self and from others. So when pausing, really tuning in. Kind of a saying that's become popular out of our work now is, "What am I feeding the field?" Ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? Is it vibrations of incoherence? Or am I feeding the field more vibrations associated with compassion and kindness and connection, caring? Because more and more, the science is clearly showing what we feed the field matters. It has measurable effects not only on us and our own health and our ability to think clearly, but others and even the physical world, right? The global field environment. So if we find ourselves in one of those lower vibrational states or frequencies, because they really are that, make a shift. Use a technique. Like, it doesn't have to be a HeartMath technique. They're great. That's what they're designed to do. But anything that helps you connect with the heart. So you can, a simple thing to do if you find yourself feeling impatient. You're in a traffic jam or waiting in line. Okay, I'm feeling impatient. We call it heart focused breathing. Just breathe through the center of your chest at a slower and deeper rhythm. Find a rhythm that's comfortable. But then after you get that rhythm comfortable, start in consciously breathing a feeling of patience. So you're instating that new vibration in your own system. So we have a lot more power to be in charge of I think of it as our emotional diet, than most people have realized. They've never been taught the skills to do this. Right? Is that making sense? Or you can breathe appreciation.
Yeah.
But
The
I'll give you
stress is
this
like linked to the heart, and you shouldn't be stressing, or you shouldn't be like always in like Dispensa says, like being how does he said, Tom, like in constant,
right.
I forgot the word, like in like when the lion is
Oh yeah,
chasing the,
like a fear response or a stress response.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
exactly,
of course,
like
Joe. I
people
know
are
Joe.
living
Dr.
in that
Dispenza.
way.
Yeah, Joe's a good friend of mine as well, Dr. Dispenza, and he tends to call what I'm talking about elevated emotions. Um, I'm just calling them higher frequency emotions, right? And you can be the feeling of calm. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. But you can just breathe the feeling of calm or composure, right? I mean, it works for almost everything. I live in the mountains here in California, the Santa Cruz Mountains, and do a lot of hiking. So I'll actually do heart focused breathing and then breathe a feeling of levity and agility. And it makes a difference, right? You start to feel lighter. It's easier to go up the hills. Um, that's
So
kind of a, you know,
yeah. I want to ask you something about that. I want to take two roads that may be directly related with where we are right now. But one question I want to do is, um, I sometimes get the feeling after making some heart coherence practice
Mhm.
that if I go and make some like cognitively demanding task, or if it's even physical exercise, that I
Mhm.
have like my capacities are like maximized.
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense from a physiological
Yeah,
standpoint?
it makes total sense. So most of our training programs are in the context of energy management, right? So we have different types of energy that are really discrete. They interrelate, but they're discrete, like physical energy, right? You guys are young, and right, so you're going to have more energy than I do now, and at my age. But if we want to increase our energy capacity physically, let's say we can walk 2 miles or whatever it is, whatever your current capacity is. To increase capacity, we dig a little deeper and stretch past that, right? So maybe if our maximum is say 2 miles, whatever that is, you maybe stretch and walk 2 miles and another quarter. And then you rest and you do that the next time. After a few times cycles of that, that's your new baseline. Right? So you've increased your energy capacity. Well, we also have, it's the same way for emotions. We have emotional energy, we have mental energy, and then we also have what I think of as spiritual energy, right? Now, of course, they can interact with each other. I'm sure everybody knows or can remember sometime when we got really mad. We just got really angry and we let it fly at somebody or something. Well, how do we feel physically 20 minutes later, right? We're drained and exhausted, right? Right. So when we're in coherence, that is optimizing all of our energy regulation systems. So it's like adding gas to the gas tank or charging our inner batteries, the metaphor we use.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
and
two
you can
things.
get
It's becoming more conscious and intelligent about how we expend energy and how we renew energy. Right. So
yeah.
those combinations is what is transformational. People
It's
don't
also
often think
addictive,
about this. Yeah.
Yeah, the stress. Like after a while, your body starts telling you, "I want more stress. I want more stress. Why I'm not feeling this?" So you get an excuse to feel that way, and it's never ending. So you have to train your body to be calm and to
Yeah.
feel actually good.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm saying, guys, doesn't mean that we're never going to react or feel frustrated or impatient. That's not what this is about. But it's about being more aware of how often we're doing that, and especially when we're doing it and it really makes no sense. Like traffic jams, right? It's kind of easy to be in the flow and all the traffic lights are green and things are flowing. But then you hit the traffic jam. For most people, what do? We get impatient. For some, it's frustrated, right? And even angry for some people that are really lack self-regulation. But does that make the traffic move any faster? Of course not. All we're doing is draining is pouring hormones into our system that stress the body and increase the aging process. Right? So that's where becoming a little more intelligent. Look, the traffic's not going to move till it moves. Make peace with it. Right? Do heart focused breathing, breathe a feeling of patience. That's what I'm really talking about here is that people would
Yeah,
be, I think, shocked if they had a computer readout at the end of the day of their energy expenditures, especially emotionally, of how
that
much
would be
they
a
drain.
good app.
Yeah, it would. You're right. Well, but physiologically, we really do. We have an internal system that's doing that, right? I mean, that you can't escape that. It's a real. There
Yeah,
really is
but
an
you need to
energy.
see it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
Yeah, I
also
think
take care of
I think
your.
it's
Yeah, sorry, no,
always
take care of your telomeres. You're talking about aging and the heart and the telomeres, like they are linked,
well,
super
those
linked.
are things that reflect that, over the long term. But it's even more important when you start to understand the way we interact with the larger self and in the role of creation, what we draw to ourselves, those vibrations we're putting into the environment, because it takes. Um, we're always kind of co-creating our reality and what we draw. I kind of look at it like, well, not. I really do believe we live in a holographic universe, and there's a lot of science behind that. I'm not mean this from a new age perspective, So we are co-creative partners within the collective shared kind of realities that we all have. And so you can think of this as a built-in safety system. Yeah, you can imagine if people could really co-create in reality their anger, their frustrations, their hatreds. It's already happening in a way globally, but I mean, if it really had the power to quickly create realities like that, it'd be a big problem. So it's a safety valve in that we can't really move into the creative realms of where we're truly interacting with and creating our own reality until our vibration, our own consciousness vibration, is able to move past the judgments and the fears and the lower vibrations, right? So it's more important than just our physical health and aging. Yeah, that's all true. But to really live a fulfilled life and really reach our true potential is far more important to things we're talking about that. Not to say that our health and our well-being and happiness isn't important. Of course it is, but there's even a bigger game going on here.
That's amazing. That's incredible. This thing about the safety valve. I think this might be related to the fact that I heard you talking about this from the global consciousness
Mm-hmm.
project, maybe,
Right.
and how it and how higher frequencies or higher states of emotion and consciousness actually have this actually bigger creative impact or power, let's say, than lower frequencies, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good example. I know people probably won't know what we're talking about here, but the Global Consciousness Project, which is a scientific instrument kind of globally distributed around the world, designed to reflect the rhythms and waves within what I think of as a global consciousness field, a shared global consciousness field. What that data over the last 20 years has shown that events that evoke that involve lots of people feeling love and compassion have a much greater measurable effect on creating a coherence in that network of devices than lower frequency emotions like anger or these types of things. So it's a great example that you bring up, Thomas, of what we feed the field matters. In this case, it's actually showing a direct impact of our collective emotions impacting in a measurable way and affecting the physical world, because these are physical devices that are being changed and manipulated.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry to go a little bit backwards because I took for granted that people knew what it was. But can you maybe give us a brief introduction of what the Global Consciousness Project is and how it works? Like in a
Yeah. I'll try and keep this brief, but to do that, I'm going to go back one step. So the Global Consciousness Project 2.0, as it's now called, is part of a larger umbrella project called the Global Coherence Initiative. And that's really a scientific initiative to study the the energetic level interconnectivity between humanity and the earth and all living systems. So within that umbrella project, we have magnetometers all around the earth to measure the vibrations in the earth's magnetic field. It's the only network like this in the world. Then we have another project measuring the electrical activity of trees. That's also a global project because there are living beings too, right? And then we have an app called the Global Coherence app that measures the coherence level of people, individuals, but also collectively, so we can study, And then the latest addition to our toolbox is what you're referring to now, Thomas, the Global Consciousness Project 2.0. And that's a project that we took over from a guy named Dr. Roger Nelson, who started it at Princeton, probably getting close to 30 years ago. And so he's retired for real now and really came to me and asked if we would take this over, which we did. So we've built a completely new version of it. But what it is, it's a global network of physical devices called random number generators. Now, for that may sound complicated. Well, it is. They are complicated to make to really build a true RNG, but what they are is really simple. And think of them as an electronic coin flipper, right? So we know if we flip a coin, right, 100 times or 1,000 times, on average, it's going to come out 50 heads, 50 tails, right? If it's a balanced coin. Now, so it's the same thing with random number generators. Instead of heads or tails, you get ones or zeros. And to be truly random, it means that you can't predict the future from the past behavior. Okay, it's kind of one of the hardcore tests. Now, but when you're flipping the coin, you might get a whole bunch of heads in a row or tails in a row or repeating sequences, even though on average they're going to balance out. All right, so when we've got all these RNGs all around the world, and they're all time synchronized, so they're flipping coins, only ones and zeros really fast. Now, what GCP1 found, and we're also finding in GCP2, is that when an event happens that causes a lot of people, a lot of us humans, to pay attention to something and have an emotional response, and that's the critical part is the emotional response, that it interacts with these devices globally, even though they can be hundreds or thousands of miles apart, where they start flipping ones or zeros at the same time over long time periods. It can be hours in some cases, okay, these sequences. So it's showing that our collective consciousness, again, I think of it as a field, and there's new data starting to suggest that's probably correct. Way to think of this is this global consciousness field, waves going through it, all right, that it interacts with these devices in a way we can measure at the global network level. So I think a good metaphor to help people understand this is if you think of rubber ducks or buoys, in the water, or say the ocean, right? And when you've got big smooth waves coming in, the rubber ducks are moving up and down at the same time, right? If you got choppy seas, it's incoherent. There's no correlated behavior. So when we add more love and compassion into enough of us do that simultaneously, there's an amplification effect that affects these nice coherent waves in the global consciousness field. So the duckies are moving up and down together at the same time in this correlated way. So we're putting coherent waves or rhythms into the global consciousness field. And then ultimately that helps others wake up a little more, become more coherent, more compassionate, because they're in that field.
When you meditate with other people, with a group of people, you can feel that it's not
exactly.
the same as meditating alone.
Yeah, exactly.
I live that. It's amazing.
Yeah, now especially if you get coherent together, right? So that's where the Global Coherence app, I don't know if you know about it or not, it's a free app that allows you to measure your own personal coherence, but also your group's coherence. So it's the only app in the world that there are a lot of apps that'll look at personal individual HRV and coherence. But this one allows you to create your own group. So you could create a group for your meditation group and actually measure that if you wanted to.
This is great. I don't know if you knew about that. I didn't, and I think it's great that the fact that you can measure individuals and groups, like maybe like a family, a workplace, even like how does the tool work? How does it measure? Like,
yeah, well, it's an app, and if you're really going to do a lot of it, it's best to have an actual sensor that measures your heart rhythm, your pulse. You put it in your earlobe. But if you don't, you can, for beginners, you can actually use the phone's camera as your pulse sensor for your heart rate variability. So it's just an app. You can download it for free from whether you're Android or Apple, from either the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. It's simply called the Global Coherence app.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I was thinking about in groups of people. I think it could be like amazing. There you would need maybe a sensor, right, for like a bigger place and more people.
Well, I mean, if you're doing a lot of meditations and things and really using the app, the sensor is by far the better way to go.
Yeah.
It's hands-free. Otherwise, you're having to hold your finger on the phone and not move it and all that. But it does work. It's an introduction to what this is about.
Okay, so inside the same topic, we know that maybe when we feel better when we meditate with a group of people, but does it actually, when it comes to like affecting the state of the world, let's say?
Yes, that's the whole thing.
I mean the number, like how like the dimension of the magnitude of the group of people in a state of coherence at the same time? Does it change anything, or is it like?
Well, I believe it does. Now I can't say that we're going to see that in the global consciousness data. That takes, you got 7 billion people all contributing to it, right? So you have to have a strong enough signal to rise above the noise, of the 7 billion people. Now it's interesting because Dr. Nilsson did show in the GCP1 that there is a correlation, significant correlation between the number of people involved. Usually these are big media events, right? Or big globally organized meditations events, and the size of the measured effect in the network. One of our new hypotheses in GCP2, which is a much larger, will be a lot when it's all finished, a much larger network, is that it's not just about the number of people. In fact, even more important is my hypothesis, is that how coherent and aligned are the people contributing to the field. So like when you have a group of meditators like you're doing, especially if you're coherent, and then I'll add one more quality, if you have a shared intention, and that if that shared intention is one of a higher vibration, like adding love and compassion to the planetary field or to each other within the group, that there's an amplification effect. So our hypothesis is that smaller coherent groups can have as large, maybe even larger effects than the masses who are all kind of all over the place, not really synchronized. And so the data so far is looking good that this is probably a correct hypothesis. And this is really important because it really does mean, I get asked a lot, from either people organizing meditation events or conferences or like what you guys are doing. We're doing this work together. Does it matter? I mean, yeah, it matters for my own health and happiness, but is it really doing anything in the world? So GCP2 is allowing us to say, yes, it does. Does that make sense?
Totally.
But
Yeah, you talk
I'll
about
add to that.
synchronicity.
We're always feeding the field. It's not just when we come together to meditate,
Yeah,
right? We're always 24/7, all individually feeding our own individual field, which is also coupled to the collective field. So that's why our mission here at HeartMath is really to facilitate a shift in the global consciousness, right? An upshift in global consciousness to where we have more global coherence, more peace and collective compassion and these types of things.
yeah,
And one
and
of the
you're
ways
doing an
that
amazing
has
work.
to happen from my perspective, well, there's two really important elements. Is people, all the individuals have to start learning that love is really the way forward, right? That's what raises our own vibration. But also, as enough of us work together, kind of the older souls that are here, and groups like yours, consistently added more love and compassion to the global field. That's going to help others wake up, right? Because it's two sides of the same coin, right? The field really does make a difference. You have to have the higher vibrations in the global field, but you're not going to get that without enough people learning the skills and having enough care to really do that.
Sure, and also I think it's really important is this idea of you talked about coherence and you talked about intention, and I think lots of people maybe confuse and leave the part of the coherence and even the emotional like state and the hard part out of the equation and mainly center on like maybe imagining something or like focusing in a mind only kind of way. Do you see that happening? Is
Oh,
it?
sure. Sure. I mean, that's been going on forever, right? I mean, let me say it this way. I mean, meditation's a big word. There are many types and forms and different practices of meditation, of course. And some are clearly more mind focused, and I would even say, and I don't mean this in a bad way, disassociative, right? Whereas the ones like the HeartMath meditations or a lot of the Buddhist practices like loving compassion, kindness meditations are more heart-based. Those are the ones that lead to physiological changes in increased heart coherence. The ones that are more mind-focused don't. Right.
After the 3 minutes technique of breathing of the heart coherence, I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe what I'm feeling.
Mm.
After 3 minutes of the technique,
Yeah.
it's life changing. It's like now I have this. Now I can connect to the heart. This is
Yeah.
I never felt like this.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. A
Um,
short story. You talked about synchronicities. I had like a group synchronicity because I went to a meditation retreat and the topic was light and darkness. And in the third day, the power went off, and everyone was like, "Wow!" Like mind blowing for everyone. Like the topic came to fruition, to reality.
Mm. Yeah.
so Roland, there's so many questions. Um, I don't know where to begin, but mainly if you had like a person, a specific individual, as like feeling really disconnected, feeling anxious, feeling stressed, feeling I don't know, like really in an incoherent kind of state,
Mm.
what would like the main I don't know, practice or I don't know, like you would like recommend to just start in an easy way that's not very complicated and it's easy
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Start with heart focused breathing. Right. It's pretty simple. Focus your attention in the center of the chest, the area of the heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of the center of the chest, your heart area. And now you breathe a little slower and deeper and find a rhythm that's comfortable. Now, to help find that rhythm when you're first beginning, I'll give you a clue. We have physiologically a natural resonant frequency. Okay, and that has to do with the neural communication between the heart, lungs, and brain. And that's a 10-second rhythm. Okay, and that's where if the inner physiological system synchronize at that frequency, respiration, blood pressure rhythms, heart rhythms, and the heart-brain synchronization is significantly increased when we're in that natural resonant frequency. So if we take on the in-breath about 4 or 5 seconds, don't hold your breath, and 4 or 5 seconds on the out-breath, we're breathing at our natural resonant frequency. Now, when people do heart-focused breathing, that's what most are going to find is that that's their most comfortable rhythm. Now, for people who aren't familiar with this and have no practice, it could feel very uncomfortable at first and unfamiliar, but stick with it, because then the brain and nervous system become familiar with their natural rhythm then, because most of us breathe too fast and too shallow, because we're stressed and so on. So just doing that is a huge step forward. Okay. Then a more advanced step is once you get familiar with that breathing rhythm to where that is familiar and comfortable, heart-focused breathing. I mean, that can stop a lot of stress reactions, just doing that. But then a slightly more advanced step would be to now, as you're doing the heart-focused breathing, activate feelings of, it could be kindness, appreciation. It could be a feeling of a genuine connection that someone you're talking with, or it could be an attitude of deep listening. So breathe in that feeling. I said earlier, breathe patience if you're feeling impatience, right? So now you're taking another step, moving more to the energetic realm of self-regulation as well, right? And then if you want to go a step farther, consciously radiate those heart qualities to be to all your cells. If you're having a physical challenge, radiate those higher vibrational heart qualities or feelings to, whatever it is, your heart or your leg or whatever. But just to all the cells in your body is what I practice. But then radiate them out into the world. Radiate those heart qualities um, out into the global field environment, or to a friend or in need, or you can really direct that energy wherever you want.
yeah, that's great. I think it's gonna be really helpful for a lot of people. Mainly the ones that
Yeah.
I think are meditating and just sitting down and not thinking or whatever they
Yeah.
think it's.
Well, okay. So I have a lot of long-term meditators, and it took me a while to years to get onto this. So while you're meditating, And it depends on, like if you're doing a Joe Dispenza type meditation, what I've worked with a lot of his folks is start with heart focused breathing, right? Get coherent, right? Do like a heart lock-in, then go do your other type of meditation if you want.
I totally agree.
And then when you're done, if it's more disassociative or, pineal gland or whatever, then come back and do heart focused, heart lock-in type meditation again at the end of
do it
that.
the other way
Get
around.
things back in sync. Yes,
I
Herman, you were
start
saying.
with Dispenza and finish it with Braden.
Yeah, well, Braden's basically HeartMath, so yeah.
Yeah, so I found that kind of Joe Dispenza and other kinds of similar meditations are for when you're like at home and have a lot of spare time, I think, and like heart focused meditations are, but at least in my experience, I usually use them anywhere, and they're like briefer, and the changes are faster.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you said that, Thomas, because meditation is important because you're training the brain and nervous system into the new baseline, as we call it. But this is something that, just as important as the meditation, is starting to become more self-aware of what's going on in our day-to-day life. We're starting to feel frustrated or anxious or impatient. That's right then and there. Do heart-focused breathing. Shift that energetics. So it's really about real-time, day-to-day life regulation, really connecting with the heart.
Yeah, because actually what like the optimal point in a like human development would be to just be more aware.
Yeah.
Right. So this is all like just practicing to be more aware of what's happening and how to be more resilient, maybe to the.
I mean, exactly. Think of it this way: you have to breathe anyway, right? So just putting a little more consciousness on heart-focused breathing, and this is something you can do with your eyes open. Nobody needs to know you're doing it. You can do it right in the middle of a meeting or a conversation. Especially if it's starting to get heated up or go sideways. Just start doing heart-focused breathing, shifting the vibration of your field. And this is where I really encourage people to become a self-scientist. And just try this stuff and observe. I mean, don't just do it once. To start seeing how that affects, life, but the world around you, the interactions you have and things when you practice those kind of skills. And it sounds like you guys have already had a lot of doing that and seen some.
Usually people notice it. Like after a few weeks of practice, they usually like tell you something, or they notice it, like you're actually different in some like strange way.
Yeah, people tell you.
Yeah, it happens, and I don't know if you get like a few more minutes.
I actually am supposed to be in another meeting right now.
Okay. So thank you for everything, Rollin. Let's talk again whenever you can. And where can people like keep in touch with your work?
Yeah, HeartMath, HeartMath.org.
Okay, that's great. So thank you very much, and let's talk again soon.
I'd love to. I'm thrilled to hear that people in Argentina are hearing about this work, and hopefully we can get maybe you all through your podcasts and your practices can help spread the word. Get more. If I may, I'll just take one more minute. The Global Consciousness Project, the random number generators, we actually need more in your part of the world. So if there's any, the website where you can sign up or fill out an application to be a host for one of the devices is gcp2.net. But I would really invite, you guys and anybody in your meditation community to, host a device. We sell it, we provide them at our cost to build them, but it would really help us get that network, especially in your part of the world.
That would be great.
Amazing.
So let's keep in touch and we'll talk about this deeper.
Okay.
Bye, Rollin.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
You too.